Hello VFX artists, this is Mr. Granlund. I'm going to take you through some of the VFX tutorials that you're going to need to know in order to do this film. First off, we're in After Effects. We're going to right click and import. You could also do Control I on the keyboard or go to File and then Import. All of these will result in the same thing. Here's the test footage I filmed for these tutorials. Alright, first up is I'm going to use MVI 829, and this is going to be a new comp from selection, and we're going to do the warp. So a lot of you are doing the warping shots, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now the first thing we need is we need a clean plate. That's where no one is in the scene, so I just take the first few seconds here and I do Control Shift and the letter D on the keyboard, and you see it makes its own duplicated layer. Now I actually want to fast forward in the video here, and I'm going to go to where I'm at the top of my jump. Not much air, but enough, right about there. And I'm actually going to do one frame before that and split it. So I cut it, I slide it back to where I'm at the top of my jump, and I slide it back one frame and do Control, Shift, and the letter D. Now I'm actually going to freeze frame this. So right click, time, and freeze frame. So what this does is no matter how long I make this layer now, it's going to be that one frozen frame. I'm going to cut this out and put it over the top of my clean plate. So I'm going to stretch that out there, and this goes on top of my clean plate, and I'm just going to slide this over closer. I'm going to adjust this so it's about 1 second long. So it goes from 1 second, second and a half long is perfect. So I have clean plate, I have one frozen frame of me in the air, and then I have the rest of my video of me kind of falling down. On this layer, we're going to double click the layer, and it's going to show layer MVI 829. That's important. Composition is over here. This is the final movie. Layer is right here. We're going to use the roto brush really quick to cut me out. So I'm going to click on the roto brush up there, and I'm going to paint in green everything that I want to keep. So follow the legs. And it gets this excess here, and I don't want that, and it gets that excess there, and I don't want that. So I hold Alt on the keyboard, and it paints with red, which means it's going to take away that part. Take away that part. And it's not exactly right. It's actually okay because it's going to be whipping around in 3D space, and you're probably not even going to notice it. The second thing I want to do is I want to pin. So this puppet pin here, we're going to click on this, and we're going to set pins kind of all over the place. Put one on the head. I'm kind of putting them on all my joints. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to curve me. So it looks like I'm in kind of an unnatural curved position. Like I'm being warped through space. It's kind of cool and funky. Kind of like a C. We're going for the letter C. Okay? So mash me around into the letter C. On my roto brush thing over here, I want to increase the feather. So it just leaves it a little bit softer on the edges. And I'm going to smooth it out quite a bit too, just so it gets nice and kind of warpy and soupy and soft on the edges. Now I'm still in layer MVI, so I'm going to go back to composition.mvi. Now this layer, I want to spin around, and I want it to spin around in 3D space. So this layer, I'm going to right click, rename it. We're going to call this warp. And warp, I'm going to make it a 3D layer. And what that's going to allow me to do, if I click on the rotate tool, is it's going to allow me to shift this into 3D space. I'm going to turn down the preview screen here from full to third, just so it renders out a little bit faster as I do this. Okay, now it's time to flip it and rotate it around. I'm going to push R on the keyboard, and I'm going to open up the X, Y, and Z rotation, and I'm going to have the Z rotation. So it's going to start at the very beginning, and I'm going to go to the end of my warp layer, and I'm going to have it rotate around 2 times. So now it spins around, and you know what, I wish it wouldn't spin on my hip, so I'm going to take this tool here, the pan behind tool, and I'm going to move the center point to where I want it to center, and I want it to spin around this point. So now you see how I spin around that point, and I'm all cut out. So that's exactly what I want. And I'm going to turn on motion blur, and I'm going to turn on motion blur for the entire composition here. And what that does, if I go to the middle of it, you see it kind of blurs me out as I spin around. Now this takes a lot of processing power, so while you're working on it, you may want to turn off motion blur. I'm going to make 3 copies of this, and I'm going to make them slightly different sizes. So on the warp layer, Control D on the keyboard to duplicate. You can also go to Edit and Duplicate. And I'm going to push R on the keyboard to open up the rotations. And I'm going to change the orientations. So I'm going to change that, and then I'm also going to size it down. Now I'm using 2 different tools. I'm using the selection tool, which is V, and using the rotation tool, which is W on the keyboard. And so now those spin around like that. And I'm going to do one more. Control D on the keyboard, push R on the keyboard to bring up the rotations. And I'm going to change the orientation again. And on this last one, I'm going to animate another rotation here. So I'm going to do the Y rotation. I'm going to have it rotate once around from there. So now it's rotating in 3 directions. But I also want all 3 of those things to size up at the same time as I'm teleporting in. So I'm going to make a new layer, null object. That object is going to be, it can be just 2D, but all 3 of these warps I'm going to parent to the null object. And the null object, I'm going to push S on the keyboard to open up the scale. I'm going to have it start at 0%. And it's going to get bigger till I get in. Now the mask is having some trouble previewing, but it should be cut out the whole time there. Now right when I pop in, here, I want the camera to shake. So I'm going to make another null object, layer, new, null object, and I'm going to parent everything to that null object. This null object already has these 3 things parented to it, so I don't need to parent that to it. I'm going to push a null object 2. I'm going to change the scale to 110, and I'm going to animate the position. So right as I'm popping in, I set the position keyframe, page down, I'm going to move it, page down, I'm going to move, I'm just moving null 2, and everything else is moving with it. Null 2, and I'm moving it again. So now it looks like this. That's a little bit slow, so I could go in here and go to my warps, push U on the keyboard, and on my Z rotation, I could increase the Z rotation. If I double click on it, so rather than 2 times around, maybe go 4 times around, push R here, maybe instead of 2 times around, I change that one to 5 times around. And I can change them to all different kinds of numbers. Push R on the keyboard, rather than 2 times around, I'll only make it 3 times around, and maybe this, maybe I'll do that 5 times around, so that really whips around there. And now if I watch that, that's giving me much more of the effect that I was hoping for. And it gets bigger, and I pop in, and that's the warp effect.